All right, hi everybody, John Meadows here, and I'm here with Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, and hopefully you've been watching the videos we've been putting up. So today we're doing a rapid fire Q&A for Brad. Now you guys have sent in the questions, so I'm going to ask Brad. We probably have about, 8 to 10 of them here. We're going to go over pretty quick.
Okay.
So let's get started. The first question comes from Dennis. And he wants to know if you believe that loaded stretching does it have any value?
Do I have an opinion? No. I mean, I would say that it is I do. I would say that it is a testable hypothesis. I think there's a potential for it. Would I say there's any good evidence of it? I'd say there is if you're a quail and you tape a quail's wing for 24 hours. We do know that loaded stretching in that context. The context of does it have an effect in a training routine, I don't know. But I will tell you the scoop here is that we will be testing that next year.
Nice. Okay. Well, I find I can't wait for that because I always like to pump a muscle up and then do an exercise that really works at a long muscle length. So, okay. Juan would like to know, what are your 3 best tips for an endomorph in the off season?
Well, first of all, when you say what are the tips, is he looking for fat loss, muscle gain? So for fat loss, you got to eat less. That's the biggest tip.
So watch your diet.
Watch your diet. I mean, assuming that he's talking about not gaining too much fat while training. From a training standpoint, there's really not people try to, in my opinion, over pigeonhole people into mesomorph, ectomorph, endomorph. And first of all, most people are combinations of such. People might think they're endomorphs, and they're really combinations. So the whole typing system, somatotyping, is somewhat hazy, and there's really no good evidence that it actually translates, that you actually need to train if it's from a training perspective, by your somatotype. What I would say is usually people that are heavier in that respect tend to be able to put on muscle more easily, so they might not need to push the volume as hard as some others, but those are all, again, more subjective. I've found certainly exceptions to those rules. So my basic thought would be, it's really one tip, is that from a fat loss perspective, you need to be much more attentive to your caloric intake. Keep your protein high as always. So as anyone, whether they're looking to build muscle and or lose fat, needs to have adequate protein, a minimum of 1.7 or so grams per kilogram of body weight. And pushing it up to 1 pound or 2.2 grams per kilogram is probably a good idea, particularly when you're looking to reduce body fat.
Okay, so Juan, watch your diet, brother. All right, Juan, by the way, has the best mustache I've ever seen. He has an old-fashioned
mustache gains.
Yeah. Okay, this comes from Jim, and he's asking for would you adjust your training volume in a cutting versus a bulking phase? Like whether if you're trying to diet or gain weight, does that play into the training volume?
Yeah, so when you're dieting, a lot of times your recovery is somewhat compromised. And again, this does, kind of with the last grade, it would depend on the individual. We've talked in other videos as well about the individual response. So I always hate to give kind of cookie cutter answers to these types of things, but as a general rule, yeah, I pull back a little on the volume because people generally's recovery is compromised, and I also tend to not push to failure as much as well during that phase because again, your recovery will tend to be somewhat compromised. So really, those are kind of the two. I try to keep the loads similar, but don't push it as much. Don't kind of overtax the system, because when a compromised recovery, you can overtrain more readily.
Yeah, and notice Brad said loads the same. So what he's saying is when you're dieting, don't lighten up. Like that's not an excuse to all of a sudden start using light weights.
Right. And you don't cut more by using lighter weights. Contrary to what some people believe, it's not cutting. High reps are for cutting. It's kind of silly.
If only it were that easy. Okay. This comes from my man Andrew Berry. Andrew is an awesome dude, and he wants to know what are a couple common things, just common things that you think hold people back from making gains or getting their best results?
So it's funny, some of them are kind of antithetical. So I would say on one end, not pushing hard enough, so in terms of volume, intensity of effort, and also pushing too hard. So you kind of have, it's kind of bookended. I think in bringing that together, not being in tune with your body enough because of the individual response. I think if I would say one overriding thing is that people tend to hear what John Meadows does and they're going to try to do exactly what John Meadows does, or Phil Heath, or whoever their favorite bodybuilder might be. And you're not John Meadows, you're not Phil Heath, and you weren't born to their parents. You didn't pick the right parents, or you didn't pick their parents. So each person is an individual, and you have to kind of get to know your body better. And within that, there's just so many different facets. So it's, should you go to failure? Well, we talked about that in another video, but some people might not be able to push to failure as much as others. How much volume should you do? Some people don't do enough, some people do too much for their own body. So a lot of these are antithetical, and I would say in the overriding kind of take home on this would be to be more in tune. You need to use science as a guide, but then be really in tune and listen, see what the pros are doing, see what the high-level bodybuilders and other scientists are talking about doing, but then tailor that to your own body, get in tune with your body.
Yeah, I have this saying, you never know where the line is until you cross a little. And I don't think a lot of people get to the line.
Yeah.
And then to your point, the other people go well beyond the line and blow their engine up.
Right.
Right. So get to that line, find out where it is, back off a little bit.
Yep.
Okay, this comes from Henry. What is your take on intermittent fasting?
That's just funny, that's a hot button topic. I usually lose a bunch of followers when I kind of get on and tell my views on this, but hey, that's what science is about. So intermittent fasting is a fine strategy for the general public that wants to lose body fat. So basically, there's nothing magical about it. Certainly in terms of fat loss. Now, could there be other health-related issues? It's a little outside of my research focus, and I have looked into that. I'm skeptical at this point. There might turn out to be things to fasting. I'm still, again, kind of not buying the way some people are extrapolating that research. But we're talking bodybuilding, that's my focus. From a fat loss perspective, no difference between doing a standard diet versus intermittent fasting, other than for some people it helps them control calories better. Ultimately, fat loss is going to come down to, in body composition. When I talk about fat loss, we're also talking about maintaining body composition. Getting your energy deficit, creating an energy deficit, meaning that you're going to expend more calories than you're taking in, and keeping protein levels high so that you're maintaining your body comp. You're maintaining your muscle, or even gaining it if you're training properly. And within that, the intermittent fasting is of value only if it helps you control those calories. Now, from a muscle building standpoint, there's not really much good research on this, so I'm talking mostly theoretically here. There's been a couple studies that have tried to look at it, and they're, again, somewhat equivocal. At least in theory, it's not the ideal muscle gaining diet because you're limiting the anabolic potential of your body to a narrow window, whether it's, let's say it's an 8-16 where you're eating 8 hours and fasting 16. When you're not eating, you're catabolic. I mean, eating is anabolic, fasting is catabolic. So if you're eating 16 hours a day and fasting 8, let's say you've eaten then you sleep, you're going to be anabolic for a longer period of time than if you're intermittent fasting for 8 hours. Just in theory, that would mean that you have greater muscle building potential. How that translates into practice, we need more science on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me grab a couple more. Joe asked, what is your favorite flavor of pancake?
Well, my new favorite flavor of pancake is lemon ricotta that I had with John this morning. Give a plug to them.
First Watch.
First Watch. That was like the best pancakes I've ever had. So my new favorite flavor, First Watch, you're in Columbus, get it there. It's lemon ricotta pancakes.
Lemon ricotta, those things are awesome.
And I think my pancake receptors have been enhanced.
For those of you who aren't aware, there's new science that shows eating pancakes creates a new muscle fiber type, number one, and there's a pancake receptor that you're born with, that it's not really activated until you eat pancakes. And when you do, it turns on IGF-1. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, last question. Brad used to compete and I would like to know does he miss competing, or did he enjoy that process?
Great question. Yeah, so I very much enjoyed the process because when I started, I mean, I'm certainly no John Meadows, but I was a skinny kid. And I mean, I gained a lot of muscle, and it was really cool for me to. When I was a skinny kid, it affected my self-esteem. So when I started training, it just had this huge effect on me. It brought me into the field. Basically, I just got so jacked, literally, by emotionally and mentally from it, that I said, this is what I want to do. I want to help others achieve this. And competing kind of was a culmination. It was almost a rite of passage where I was able to say, hey, look, now I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Do I miss it? No. As a matter of fact, it's grueling. So looking back, I kind of sometimes get the bug. I see some real good bodybuilders, or I work with them, and I'm like, I'd be cool. And then I start remembering what it's like, and the dieting, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So it's a grueling process, and I was never at the pro level that you were, so you don't see the glory. You win a pro show, it's a different ball game where you really get. You're in a local show, it's cool, and I did that for years. So I had multiple wins in my time within the narrow, natural bodybuilding scope that I did. But no, at this point, I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. So.
Well, I think that's a great question, because one of the things that Brad has a large following amongst pro bodybuilders, amateur bodybuilders, because he did used to compete, and so that kind of gives him street credibility. So when he's conducting studies and doing things like that, we know, like he knows what he's talking about. He knows what to look for. He knows what the confounding factors are. So I just think it is a great question, because it's awesome that you've been able to, you have a true love for it. And I started competing when I was 13 because I had a true love for it, and the love is same way with you. We both really truly love training to gain muscle, and it's a passion. And I think that's why so many people in our industry respect you, not only in the scientific community, but for us non-PhD meatheads that really value what you're doing. So I just want to thank you for all that you're doing in the community, Brad. You're doing an awesome job. We all look up to you. So for those of you who aren't following Brad, make sure you follow him on Instagram at Brad Schoenfeld, PhD, right? Mm-hmm. And just, you'll take your game up. You'll level up with your knowledge following Brad. So thank you, sir.
Thank you,
We're
John.
going to go train now.